Hello, everybody. This is Marty Marion. Welcome to the Master Course. In our last session, we talked about controlling the consumer or client decision-making process. Today, we're going to close the loop on how the decision-making process in the mind of your client, your target, your prospect, your intended customer gets closed, and how we as marketers and advertisers can stimulate closing that. And it's a really important concept because getting 90% of the way there isn't enough. We can't afford to have all the time, all the money, all the effort, all the resources that we've put in to acquiring a qualified prospect, only decide at the very end of this process not to hire us or engage us or buy our product. And what we're going to talk about today is how we close that gap, how we make sure that more of those targets we have gotten to the water drink it. And that being said, we're also going to break into Marty's vault of advertising examples. And I'm going to show you several examples of advertising that changed the game completely using positioning and depositioning strategy embedded into the ads that made a major difference to the companies that put these ads out. Now, some of these were created even before the concept of positioning and depositioning was spoken about in that language, but we're going to dissect those from a positioning and competitive advantage perspective. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen. The client or customer decision-making process is the whole ball game, right? We can spend time, we can spend money, we can be creative, we can test everything, we can try 18 different tactics, A, B, C, D, E test, headlines, creatives, offers, calls to action. But if we can't close that last step, it's kind of disappointing. And we're going to wind up looking back and say, well, what did I do wrong? And the answer that I see very often is you didn't do anything wrong. You may have left something out, or you may have inadvertently not understood some of the pieces that are involved in how consumers and clients make their buying decisions, the process they go through, and how they come to the end of that to say, yes, I'm going to buy this, hire you, engage your service. So we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to do a very quick recap. We're going to talk about part two, the end, the final stage of the buying decision process. And then I'm going to break open Marty's vault and show you some actual examples of ads that used positioning, used depositioning to generate competitive advantage. And we're going to deconstruct those. And then a little glimpse of what happens next time. So, quick recap. In session 10, we explored the relationship between the concept and the definition of brand and branding, and how both of those relate to the concept of positioning. And we saw that positioning comes first. Why? Because it's a core strategy. And strategy always comes before tactics. Tactics are wonderful. You can't execute or deploy anything without having good tactics. Tactics are what get tested. Tactics are what show you initial results so you can refine them and modify them, right? But it's a circular process. And it all comes back to the core foundational strategy. So positioning comes first. And the positioning, when it's crafted properly, gives you the information you need to create your branding messages and your elements, which could be a logo, it could be a tagline, it could be a headline, it could be images, it could be a call to action, it could be website copy, social media copy, it could be anything, but it flows from the strategy. And when you have a strategy that enables you to create powerful tactics and you deploy those properly, that's what generates results. We also explored the difference between competitor and competition. And the essence is that competitors play in the same category. They play in the same playground that you're playing in. So if you're a PPC agency, your competitors are other PPC agencies or other agencies or consultants that offer PPC services. But if you are a PPC provider, your competition might be an SEO provider because they're playing with an alternative option to achieve what the target's looking for, which in the example of PPC or SEO is more traffic, hopefully more qualified traffic. And we went through the first 3 stages of the consumer decision-making process. And because we're going to close this loop today, I'm going to spend a little time recapping this so it's fresh in everyone's mind. Step 1 is the moment of discovery, the problem recognition moment. This is when your target realizes or is made to realize that they have a need, they have a pain point, they have a desire for something, and they may not have even realized it until it was brought to their attention. This has something to do with what we call creating a market, and we're going to talk about that in a future session. But the moment that your target accepts that there is a discrepancy between where they are now, where they want to be, where they should be, where they could be, that's that moment of recognition, the problem recognition moment. And it stimulates a chain reaction in their mind because as human beings, we're hardwired to solve problems. We don't like to leave things unanswered. We don't like question marks floating around in our head. And we don't like living with problems or unfulfilled needs or desires. So we have this moment of problem recognition and we say, yeah, I've got to solve that, right? So I become compelled to resolve. And we talked about the 2 movers in a previous session. We try to resolve any questions of doubt, and we try to change whatever state we're in that's leading us to be dissatisfied. I'm not ranking in my map pack. My website isn't converting. My ads aren't generating the right ROI. Whatever it is that you might be dissatisfied with, or your target might be dissatisfied with, if we can help them understand that they should be dissatisfied, that stimulates the moment of problem recognition. We also talked about the 4 buckets, the reasons why problem recognition motivates a buying exploration, which leads to a buying decision. The physiologic needs, I'm hungry, well, what food do I eat? I'm tired all the time. How do I sleep better at night? Sex, safety, etc. We talked about the psychologic needs. for independence or a feeling of pride or accomplishment or success, love, power, achievement. We talked about the third bucket, which are desires for something. Well, maybe I want to be accepted as a thought leader in my industry. Maybe I want to be seen as a category leader. Maybe I want that recognition so that I can be invited to speak at events and masterminds, or everybody wants to flock to me because I'm seen as the expert, or I want status or pleasure, or I want financial success. That's certainly a desire. And the fourth bucket, which is the freedom from motivators. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to be scared. How am I going to pay my rent next week, next month, next year? I'm going to be able to pay my staff, my employees. We don't want loss. I've put so much into this business, I can't afford to lose it. We don't want to be ridiculed. And we certainly never are comfortable in that mode of feeling dissatisfied. So we also talked about how this problem recognition moment happens. And it happens two ways. It can be self-induced, meaning I come on my own volition to realize that something isn't right. I'm not getting what I thought I was going to get. I'm not achieving the results I was promised. Something isn't jiving here. So I'm making the decision, I need to do something to fix that. Or this problem recognition moment could be prompted by an event that happens. I woke up this morning, I have to go to a client meeting and my laptop is dead. Wow, that's a problem. So I need to get a new laptop. So sometimes we realize, and sometimes we are made to realize. And we can be made to realize that we have this gap, this discrepancy, by an event or by an external third party event, experience, or message. This could be an ad that we see. Been suffering from allergies my whole life, and I see an ad about this great product that eliminates allergy symptoms. It could be a news article that I read or word of mouth. My friend could be telling me about something and a light bulb goes off. Or it could be a colleague in business that says, you know, I took a look at your website and I think you really need to talk to so-and-so because they've got this great program that's going to help you solve this problem. It could be word of mouth. It could be an ad. It could be new. It could be an influencer. And it doesn't have to be a celebrity influencer, a Kim Kardashian. It could be someone that you trust or your target trusts. Then once you've recognized that you have this gap, this discrepancy, the target embarks on a process of closing that gap. And there are a couple of pieces there. They need information. They need to understand more. They need to do some research and they need to learn. But more importantly, information could be accurate or it could be false. It could be complete or it could be superficial. It could tell me most of what I need to know, but not everything. So I take this information in, but I also have to process it. I have to think about it and I have to consider. And what I'm doing is I'm measuring in my mind as a target. You're proposing that I hire your PPC agency or I engage you to write some custom schema for me. Okay, well, you know what? I'm not a schema expert. I have a lot of questions. So you've told me, you've shown me some results you've gotten, you've explained why it's important, but I need to apply it to my specific situation. So I may ask some more questions, or I may say, well, what about this? Or give me a detailed proposal. What are you going to do for me? How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? What can I expect to get? So this target embarking on the process is not only finding and receiving in this information, it's the process by which they consider it. And we're going to talk about this today. Targets could theoretically be bombarded by options to consider. Imagine you go on Facebook, you go in a popular group, and you ask a question. Can anybody build a website for me that does A, B, and C? Wow, goodbye inbox, right? You've all experienced this. And there are so many options. How do we weed through them? How do we narrow this down so that we can make an intelligent decision that is most likely to generate the results we want, the solution to our problem, the fulfillment of our needs or desires? And we talked about the fact that this process is one of elimination, more so than it is one of proactive selection. So the target starts with all the possibilities that are out there that might potentially solve their need or problem. And they go through this consideration. They're doing research, they're Googling, they're reading reviews, they're talking to colleagues, they're remembering their own experiences. And the objective is to whittle this list down so that we get to a short list, right? It's the finalists of the beauty contest. We call it the evoked set. And this process is one of consideration. And the consideration question is really, really simple. It happens very quickly. Okay, I've asked for something, I'm looking for something, I'm researching something that I need, and I come across an option. Do I keep it or do I toss it? That's the initial consideration. And do I want to go further in considering this particular option or not? So it's really a keep it versus toss it decision that happens first. This is something we need to be very aware of. We're going to go into greater depth on this. But our objective as the offerer of the service or the product is to not get eliminated. That's more important than trying to force being chosen. It's not getting eliminated. And, you know, if you go through some number of steps in the target's mind and you don't get eliminated by process of elimination, at the end of that process, if you weren't eliminated, you get chosen. So our objective is to be there, to be found, to present our information, our message, our meaningful benefit, our brand promise or our service promise or our product promise, and not be eliminated, because we're not the only one. So our target may be getting proposals from 2 or 3 agencies or 2 or 3 providers, or looking at 3 or 4 different merchants of cashmere sweaters or whatever it is. And we want to not be eliminated. And so the whole ball game here is about getting into the evoked set, the final set. We start where the target has all the possible choices in the world. It moves into a narrower set, the awareness set. This is where the prospect or the target's own experiences come into play, where they remember, I had one of those once, didn't work out. Oh, yeah, I had a friend who used that agency and they weren't really thrilled. So, I remember them, but not in a good light. So the awareness set is a narrower set of what your target already might be aware of. The consideration set gets even narrower as the target says, yeah, I don't think that one's going to work. Not sure about this one. Yeah, that might do it. Keep. No, I definitely don't want that. Toss. And so what happens is the target keeps whittling down from all to some to fewer till they get to the evoked set, which is the last one or two choices that might actually, in my belief set, solve my problem. Positioning is what gets you in at the beginning of this process. And it keeps you there during what I call the beauty contest. And the depositioning component of your marketing and messaging is what pushes competitors out of the mind of your target while they're considering keep or toss, keep or toss. So if you can emphasize your depositioning the right way, as the target considers their different options, your competitors are going to get eliminated. You're going to remain until the evoked set. In stage 3, the target evaluates this evoked set to make their final buying decision. I've narrowed it down to those two. I'm going to buy one of them, or I'm going to hire one of them. Which one? This is where the rubber meets the road. And making this final decision is subject to and impacted by and influenced by several very specific factors. One, the target's own preconceived notions or prior experiences, right? If somebody has used an HP laptop twice and both times they had terrible experience with it, the likelihood they're going to buy another laptop from HP is slim to none, and Slim has likely left town. The perceptions and beliefs that the target has acquired doing their research, Googling best laptops, talking to colleagues. Hey, Ethan, I know you're, kind of a laptop kind of guy. What do you recommend? My need is graphic design, or my need might be massive spreadsheets, or my need might be video creation. And each of those, you might have an opportunity to guide me in one direction or another. Perceptions gained from external sources, and we have several levels. Remember the ladder of influence? We have external sources that we totally trust. We have external sources that we may not know, but they have a great reputation. So I should probably accord them a level of trust. And we have external sources that we don't know at all, and they're probably being paid to be an influencer or give a testimonial about something. It's not terribly credible. And then we have external influences and external sources like ads. but it doesn't matter. Because what the target is really doing during this process is they're asking the following questions. This is something that's worth writing down, remembering, reviewing this later, because these are the questions that you need to answer to ensure you don't get eliminated and you remain through the beauty contest into the evoked set so that you have a high likelihood of being the one chosen. First question is the obvious. Does this brand or product or service or consultant or agency really solve my pain point, my need or desire? Are they qualified? Is it quality? Whatever goes into the target deciding, yes, you could. The next part is, do they believe it? You may talk a great game, but what do your results look like? Some people are absolutely brilliant, but they're terrible test takers, so they fail tests. Some people aren't as brilliant, but they're amazing with the science of how to take a test, so they're going to score very high. The target is going to find out sooner or later, but the target wants to know, can I trust? Can I believe? Can I feel comfortable? The next thing is, because the target has gone through the total set to the awareness set to the consideration set, they've eliminated a bunch, they've gotten to the last couple, the target is asking, how does option A stand versus option B in terms of how it's differentiated? Do they do exactly the same thing, or does one of them have this secret sauce or unusually high level of experience or expertise or a proprietary ingredient? So differentiation from your competitors is really important. That's part of the positioning matrix. And then we have the depositioning. The target's asking, is there a reason that I should not consider option B? And what is that reason? And as we look at this, this kind of mimics the positioning matrix, doesn't it? There's a meaningful benefit, there's some aspect of believability, there's differentiation, and there's depositioning. Because all of this keeps tying back to the positioning matrix, crafting the positioning platform, putting the messages out there so that it impacts your targets when they are making a decision about whether to engage or hire or buy from you. And this brings us to the last stage, the buying decision itself. The final step, the last mile. In order to maximize the potential or the likelihood that our brand or our service or our product or our agency is the one that gets chosen, we need to craft our positioning, depositioning messages so that we can deploy them across all the different stages of the consumer consideration path. From the moment of problem recognition, when the target starts to look for a solution, all the way through their keep it or toss it, keep it or toss it, keep it or toss it process until they get to the final evaluation moment. In marketing speak, we need to have certain types of messages that are more appropriate for top of funnel of the customer journey, some that are more appropriate for middle of funnel, and some that are more appropriate for bottom of funnel. So we go from furthest away to kind of ready to very ready. And to be able to craft our messages at these different stages, we need to understand the types of decisions that could be made and the complexities involved in making each type of decision. We're going to get there in a second. But I want to stay on this top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel concept for a moment. The message that we need to convey to the further out universe or level of stratosphere of our potential targets, the top of funnel, is a message that's going to do two things. It's going to draw them closer in, further down our funnel, and it's going to hopefully very quickly impart a depositioning, right? So we get rid of a lot of the other contestants in the beauty contest as quickly as possible. Timing matters. As we bring someone into middle of funnel, our message varies a little bit. It goes a little deeper into answering the questions of why should you, my target, seriously consider taking the next step. Depositioning is still important, but not quite as much. Bottom of funnel, when they're ready to buy, right there, that's when things like our offer and our credibility and our points of proof and reasons to believe get emphasized. So we have the same positioning platform. We have the same positioning strategy, the same meaningful benefit. How we word, how we craft our messages, how we wordsmith what we're saying at different times in the consumer decision cycle is going to make all the difference in the world. And all of that is based on understanding what type of decision we're asking someone to make. So we're going to talk about the final step, the buying decision, and we're going to break it down into 4 very specific types of decisions, and we segment this by the complexity level of the decision. Complexity is 100% related to how the target perceives the risk and the cost of making this purchase. And when I say purchase, it could be engagement, it could be hiring, it could be accepting a proposal. Risk and cost. And these are actually diagnostic tools that we use to determine the depth of complexity of each type of decision. The higher the level of risk, the more complex it is to make a decision. And it takes longer to make this decision. And it requires a greater degree of influence being cast to the target to help influence their decision in our favor. Let me say this again. The greater the risk of making the decision, the longer it takes to make it. And the longer it takes to make it, the more opportunities there are for the target to find a reason to eliminate us. We don't want that. So when it comes to risk-based analysis of decisions and using positioning and depositioning to control that, our objective here is to shorten the time frame between the moment of discovery that I have a need and making the decision. Because the less time I have, the less likely I'm going to find another option, be dissuaded, be influenced. So timing matters. You're going to hear me say this a lot. The other component that's diagnostic is the cost of making this decision. The greater the cost to your target, in financial terms, the more considered the decision will become, and the more time it will take to become comfortable with that level of spend, risk, capital outlay relative to the purchase. And the more tangible, the more solidified your positioning promise needs to be. So we have two factors. How risky is it for me to hire your agency? And how much is it going to cost? And based on risk and cost, we define 4 specific types of decisions. And the specific type of decision that you are faced with, getting your target to make is going to change not what your positioning platform is, but how you present it. So the first type of buying decision are routine decisions, routine responses, or we call them pre-programmed decisions. These are things we do regularly, things we do frequently. And routine responses typically have a very low risk and a very low cost. And because they have a low risk and a low cost, we make them faster. We need very minimal search information, uncovery and discovery consideration. It's not a big decision. And if I make the wrong decision, my risk is low, my cost is low. Who cares? These kinds of programmatic decisions get made very quickly, almost automatically. For example, I'm thirsty. What am I reaching for? Or groceries. I'm going to go shopping for groceries. Or what shoes am I going to wear today? What brand of petrol am I going to put in my car? Does it really make that much of a difference? No. If I choose the wrong pair of shoes, what's the worst that could happen? I didn't feel as comfortable as those other shoes. It's no big deal. The next type of decision is something we do run into a lot with clients and targets. Limited decisions. What's a limited decision? These are typically purchases or engagement decisions that have a minimal to moderate level of risk and cost. So they take a little bit more consideration. And we find this when our target is trying to do something or make a decision in a familiar category about an unfamiliar brand or product or service. I need a laptop. That's a familiar category for me. But I've never heard of XYZ brand of laptop. So not familiar with them. but they seem to be pretty powerful, and several friends of mine recommend it. So I'm familiar with the category. I'm just unfamiliar with the specific provider. PPC, SEO, lead generation. Your targets know what that means, but they may not know you, your agency, your service. These types of decisions require a moderate degree of information gathering and consideration, because you don't have to educate them about the category. But you do have to educate them about you, your brand, your service, your agency, your consultancy, your expertise, why you do things differently. So it takes a little bit more work. For example, clothing to buy. I need a suit to go to a wedding. I don't want to just buy any suit, because why do I want to buy something I'm going to wear once and never wear again? Or a restaurant that I'd like to take somebody out to celebrate a very special occasion. I'm going to think about that a little more than where am I going for dinner tonight? The third type of decision we do face a lot as marketers, trying to get more customers and clients. And this is the complex decision making. These are infrequent purchases or buying actions that typically have a higher risk level and a higher cost. So if I hire the wrong PPC agency, or the wrong social media marketer, or the wrong expert to write my schema code, there's a risk there. There's a time risk. Maybe it's 2, 3 months, 6 months before I find out I'm not getting the results I wanted, or they were completely off base. There's typically a higher cost. When we enter the world of complex decisions, infrequent things, how often do your targets hire a new agency? How often do they build a brand new website from scratch? How often do they do any of these kinds of bigger ticket items? When I say bigger ticket, I mean more expensive than buying lunch. How often do they need this? And because it's less frequent, there's a higher degree of it really matters. So I need to do more research. I need to understand it better. I'm going to ask more questions. And these kinds of decisions, the complex decisions, have the highest level of information discovery, processing, evaluation, and consideration in the mind of the target. And you need to be there to support this. Points of influence are extremely important because your target is likely unfamiliar with you. It could be a lead. It could be someone that responded to an ad. It could be word of mouth. It could be a response to a post in Facebook, but they don't know you. So you want to bring to bear as much influence as you possibly can. We see this all the time with social proof. Look at these amazing clients that have hired us. And so we want to be aware of what we have in our arsenal that we can bring to bear, so that it's not just us saying how good we are, it's all these other Fortune 100 companies who have hired our agency, as an example. And complex decisions are really higher risk, higher cost. Buying a home. How often do you buy a new home? Or buying a new car? Or choosing what college to send your kids to? Or proposing marriage to someone? The more complicated the decision, the higher the risk that comes along with making the wrong decision, the higher the cost involved that you don't want to lose. Your target doesn't want to lose all this money. The longer it's going to take to make the decision. And this includes choosing an agency or hiring a consultant. And the last type of buying decision is what we call the impulse buy. Now, there's not a lot we can do to plan for impulse buys, right? Or impulse decisions. This is really not subject to a conscious control or planning process. Now, there are opportunities to stimulate these impulses if you really, really understand your target and their pain points. You can create, for example, ads that people are highly likely to look at and say, oh, wow, that's amazing. Impulse decisions are made very erratically. They're not timed. You don't think about it. You're walking down the street and you see a dress in the window and you say, oh, I really like that dress. Boom, go in, buy it. It's not something you planned for. And because the target isn't planning for impulse decisions, you can't really do a lot of planning to control them. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to break open Marty's vault of advertising treasures. And we're going to take a look at some ads that absolutely nailed the subtleties of positioning and depositioning relative to the complexity, risk, and cost of the type of buying decision, and that resulted in a complete shift in market demand. So everybody knows Nike. In 1988, Whedon and Kennedy, one of my favorite creative agencies, came up with an idea for Nike. Now, let me paint a little picture for you. Back in the mid to late 80s, Nike was not the category leader in running shoes. They were getting their butt kicked by companies like Adidas and Reebok. So they turned to Whedon and Kennedy. Help! So Whedon and Kennedy found this guy, Walter Stack. And Walter is kind of a legend in his own time. Walter Stack is credited as being the guy who was the motivation behind this whole explosion of marathons, running clubs. Now, Walter was a character. He almost never won a race. In fact, pretty much he always came in last. But the cameras were always on him. He was persistent. He was consistent. Think about who this might appeal to. And he had a slogan. He'd be interviewed by the media. Walter, so this is your 7th marathon that you've lost and came in last. Why do you do this? What's your philosophy? And he said, well, I believe in starting slow and then tapering off. He was cute. He was funny. He was adorable. But he was well known. So he was perfect because no matter how many times he lost, he went back for the next marathon. So Whedon and Kennedy approached him and said, you are the perfect representation of the philosophy of never give up. And they took him to Nike and they presented a positioning proposition to Nike to take the position as the brand that champions those who push on, break through boundaries, never give up, fight on. You'll always have a chance of winning, but if you're not in it, you're not going to win it. So this is Walter. I believe he was in his 80s at the time. And Walter and Just Do It came out together. Let me show you. Nike's very first TV commercial was 30 seconds. And it showed Walter, 80 years old, and he was running in San Francisco across the Golden Gate Bridge on a very cold winter day. And the only thing he was wearing was a cap, his running trunks, and a pair of running shoes. That's it. He was virtually naked. So it opens up with Walter on the Golden Gate Bridge, and you hear Walt saying, I run 17 miles every day. People ask me, how do I keep my teeth from chattering? Ha, I leave them in the locker. Okay, big laugh. But the moment of realization sinks in, despite all the odds, despite the cold weather, despite never having won, the message comes up on the screen, just do it. Game over. Nike changed the world with this. In fact, in the PDF, I'm including a link for you to take a look at the original TV commercial. But let's look at this from a positioning point of view. Nike is for people who have the courage and willpower to endure through hardships. What's the implication? They want to win. They want to achieve. What's the meaningful benefit? What's the pain point? Hardship, challenges. It's tough. What's the depositioning? All other sneakers, all other running shoes are for ordinary people, not the extraordinary person. This one campaign, not only Just Do It, going on to becoming one of the all-time most famous marketing positions in the world, but this strategy took Nike way ahead of Reebok in what we called the sneaker wars of the 1980s. And Nike was losing really badly at the time until Whedon and Kennedy created the positioning and depositioning campaign of Just Do It. This is another brilliant example. I was actually very fortunate to work with M&M Mars Company. So I got to see this one from the inside. Not at the beginning, but as they were evolving the campaign. I'm not that old. In 1954, Ted Bates Advertising, again, one of the great creative ad agencies of the golden era, came up with a campaign for M&Ms that is, in my position and widely acclaimed, to be one of the best and simplest, purest positioning and depositioning ad campaigns of all time. Who's the target? The target was parents, mostly moms, of kids who love chocolate candy. Who doesn't love chocolate candy? Who's the competitor? Every other chocolate candy out there. What's the pain point of these parents of kids who like chocolate candy? Well, chocolate candy is messy, right? Parents don't want their kids getting all chocolatey, gooey mess on their hands and then wiping it on the couch and the curtains and the towel and the kitchen table and the toys and whatever. Chocolate mess? Parents didn't like that. So Ted Bates came up with the concept of, well, the differentiator of this chocolate candy is that it's a little piece of chocolate which is wrapped in a hard candy shell. So until you put it in your mouth and you break through that shell, there's no mess. So M&M's melts in your mouth. Not in your hands, Mom. In fact, this is the original container, a retail store box that had bags of M&Ms in it from 1954. And you can see the milk chocolate melts in your mouth, not in your hand. That's the whole message right there. And the little anthropomorphized M&M candy guys, they're showing you their hands. And then as it evolved into the 60s, the M&M characters had bigger hands with white gloves on them that weren't what? Smudgy, messy with chocolate that had melted. Why? Because the milk chocolate melts in your mouth, not in your hand. Texas Tech University marketing department did a study, and this campaign was considered at the time the most well-liked slogan in the history of advertising. And it's so simple and it's so pure. Positioning, yeah, it's great for me. My kids aren't going to get dirty. Depositioning, all those other chocolate candies are likely to cause a mess in my house on my kids' clothes that I'm going to have to wash again. And now we get to the big one, and I say that a little sarcastically. You're going to like this. This campaign is considered widely by advertising professionals everywhere as the ad that changed everything in advertising. Everything. It was created by a not very well-known creative director named Helmut Schmitz at Doyle Dane Bernbach, DDB, again, one of the big ad agencies, in 1959. And this is one of the first advertising campaigns that was based almost entirely on psychological depositioning and a remedial positioning that took into account the risk and the cost of a complex decision. This is an amazing example of how simple it can be when you understand how positioning works. Volkswagen. Volkswagen in America had a very troubled history. Remember, this is 1957, 8, 9. World War II had just ended. And Volkswagen was highly associated with Hitler. Particularly, you can imagine the American propaganda media during World War II against Hitler and the Nazis. And here we have this German car with the popular story going around that it was designed by Hitler. Volkswagen, the people's wagon. Wow. Look at the baggage it came with. And at the same time, post-war, post-World War II, America was enjoying a financial boom. The middle class was exploding. People had money. It was the heyday. Everything was wonderful in the 50s. People loved their big Detroit-made gas-guzzling cars. The bigger, the better. Cadillac, Lincoln Continental, Chrysler Imperial, giant cars that would get about, I don't know, 2 miles to the gallon. And here we have Volkswagen coming in, closely aligned with the concept of Hitler and taking on a sacred cow in America, the big land yacht of a boat, of a car. And to top it all off, the Volkswagen was a laughing stock. It was ugly. It was a little squished up. People called it the bug, the beetle. And they weren't saying it to be kind. But Doyle Dane Bernbach used positioning and depositioning in one of the ways that literally changed the whole world of advertising. This was the ad. Think small. Wow. Small Volkswagen, large negative space on the ad. Headline, think small. I'm going to read this to you. As I read this, I want you to think about the positioning and depositioning built in. Our little car isn't so much of a novelty anymore. A couple of dozen college kids don't try to squeeze inside of it. The guy at the gas station doesn't ask where the gas goes. Nobody even stares at our shape anymore. In fact, some people who drive our little fiver don't even think 32 miles to the gallon is going any great guns. Or using 5 pints of oil instead of 5 quarts. Or never needing antifreeze. Or racking up 40,000 miles on a set of tires. That's because once you get used to some of our economies, you don't even think about them anymore. Except when you squeeze into that small parking spot or renew your small insurance or pay a small repair bill or trade in your old Volkswagen for a new one. Wow. We were heading into the 60s. The 60s were an era of enlightenment and, world consciousness and flower power and, peace and love. We were starting to become aware of our planet, our world around us. And you know what? Maybe having a big giant hunk of a tank of a car, gas guzzling, more people were driving, more people were having cars. Yes, parking spots were hard to squeeze into if you had a Cadillac. Think small. Positioning, all the advantages of economy, small bills, small insurance, etc. Depositioning. You don't need that big hunk of a car with all the expense and all the hassles. And this campaign totally overcame all the negative baggage that came along with Volkswagen from Germany and the ugliness of it, because now we made it cute. It was okay to think small. It was cool to have a Volkswagen. What's the meaningful benefit? 32 miles to the gallon. What's the provability here? Volkswagen dealers offered you take the car home for the weekend, drive it around, see if you can fit in those parking spots. Differentiated from other cars? Wow, just look at it. Depositioning. It's the polar opposite of ostentatious. It's the polar opposite of expensive, hard to maintain. So what do we learn from these couple of examples? Even though they didn't call it positioning and depositioning back then, the psychological impact of the buying decision was all about influencing perceptions in favor of your brand, depositioning perceptions away from competitors, the running shoes for people who like to endure. Oh, not those other running shoes. The chocolate candy that doesn't melt in your hands and make your kids messy, like all those other chocolate candies. The car that has all these economies and isn't costly or ostentatious. Understanding the consumer decision-making process enabled these agencies to work for these brands to overcome challenges, challengers, and massive category leaders. And that's what it's all about. We also see that tapping into the potential to disconnect, I call it unbinding, consumers or targets from sacred cow brands and products, and to be able to understand the four triggers: physiologic, psychologic, desire for, freedom from, that stimulate buying decisions, enables brands and services, agencies, whatever you're doing, whatever you're offering, to craft really powerful positioning and depositioning based messaging strategies that you can deploy across all channels. Move the target away from your competitors. Remain in the consideration. Fulfill the needs. Stimulate their belief that you'll fill their needs, solve their problem, overcome their pain point in ways that your competitors either can't or don't or won't. So next time, we're going to talk about controlling what we call perceptions and interrupts. These are micro perceptions, little tiny things that add up, micro experiences, and how you create them for your services and your products. We're going to talk about the timing of the decision-making process. We talked a little earlier about how timing matters and how from the moment of discovery until the moment of making the decision, we want it to be the shortest amount of time. I'm going to show you how that works. And I'm going to give you a concept that I developed called the river of no. The river of no is a rapidly rushing river. And if your target falls into the river of no, you lose them. So I'm going to show you how you avoid your agency or your product or your service falling into the river, and how you can prevent all of your prospects and targets and consumers and customers from falling into the river and saying no to you. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me here on the Master Course.